Well, we're going to get started with our session about where we are with community power in Concord. But thank you for joining us, and thanks for taking some time out of your busy lives. I know we all have busy lives to be with us this evening. My name is Rob Werner. I am the chair of the Concord Energy and Environment Advisory Committee. And we have been working diligently for the last number of months looking at the whole concept of community power and the benefits of what we think that approach will bring to our community. And you'll hear a lot and learn a lot more about that this evening. But just to set the table a little bit for tonight's discussion, what we have done at the Concord Energy and Environment Advisory Committee is that we did meet on January 24th was our most recent regular meeting. And at that meeting, we recommended to City Council to have the City of Concord join the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire as our way of bringing community power to the community. And you'll hear more and learn more about the Community Power Coalition this evening and have an opportunity to ask questions, of course, all the way through. So I wanted to also provide a little context as to why we're doing this and why we think it's important. There are a couple reasons. One, we as a city some years ago set a goal of 100% renewable energy generation for our entire community, not just municipal operations, but the entire community in terms of residential aspects and business aspects. And we did that for a variety of reasons, to meet the challenge of climate change, to provide an opportunity for economic development for our city, to help spark more renewable energy, which we think will also help with our environment, but can create, again, economic opportunity and development for the city and jobs. So that is a very important context in terms of why we are bringing community power to the community. And the City Council will have a public hearing on March 11th in order to hear more from the community and hopefully shortly make a decision after that to follow our recommendation as a committee to join the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. We also expect that joining community power will provide more stable and lower rates. Part of the point of a community power program and the success that has been demonstrated so far across the state, and there are many communities that are pursuing this, have already launched their programs, have had a demonstrated reduction in rates and below what normally people are paying on what we call the utility default rate, which is what you would get in the mail from your provider, in our case mostly Unitil. And that's really important to be able to provide that opportunity for lower rates as well. And then the last thing I want to say, sort of in the larger context, you know, as elected officials, and I used to be one, and there are some here tonight, thank you, I firmly believe that it's our business to help people. And it's our business to help make their lives better. And this is, again, a reason why we are pursuing this, for the benefit of our community. And to make sure also, in a way, that, you know, government is effective and that we're representing you well. And again, we are improving your lives. So I think that's an important context as well. So what I'd like to do now is we're going to go into sort of the details of what community power is and what we're talking about in terms of our recommendation and the time frames that we're talking about and how it might all work. So what I'll do now is turn it over to Joe Kwasnick, who has a developed background in energy and served on our one of our committees to help work through all of the detail around community power. I also want to take the opportunity, before I do that though, to thank our city staff for their work and staffing our committee and the terrific work that has come forward from the city as well. It's a lot of work. We are all volunteers on our committee, and it's terrific to have the support of city staff and to be able to have documents that are well written and understandable for the public. So I'm glad we were able to do that. But what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Joe and start going with our presentation.
Thanks all for coming out tonight. My name is Joe Kwasnick. My background is 30 years with National Grid, and then I've spent 9 years in my previous life, 9 years on the New Hampshire Electric Co-op Board and 3 years as their chairman. And I'm working as an advisor to the subcommittee of the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee to the City Council. So I'm third level down, so I don't get to make any decisions. Just do some of the work, but most of the work is done by this gentleman over here. But anyways, I'm going to just give you a little bit of background on community power, what it means, how it's developed, and where it's going. We do have Henry Herndon here tonight from the coalition, who is much more knowledgeable than I am on the coalition and also community power. So a lot of detailed questions. If I can't answer them, Henry will be here to do that. So, okay. Next slide. Okay, how we got to today's electric system. In 1996, the New Hampshire legislature enacted the Electric Utility Restructuring Law. Goals was to demonopolize the power sector. In other words, in the past, the utility sector was always what they called vertically integrated. The power companies owned the generating plants, they owned the wires, they owned the transformers, they did all the work, and it was called vertically integrated, and it was a monopoly. So what the law was intended was to demonopolize the power sector, giving customers more choice, lower costs, enable market innovation. Some of these things have come to pass, some have not. So part of what community power is trying to do is provide a little more innovation and help lower costs. So we're hoping to arrive at 26 years later to actually help the customers, electric customers in the city. The effect, utilities, back in 1996, utilities sold the generation facilities, like the Bow Power Plant was sold within the last 4 or 5 years. That had been owned by Eversource for a number of years. All the other utilities had sold off their generating plants to private power generators. So that was one of the first things to be done with the restructuring of the electric utility system in 1996. I actually remember that. I was actually involved with some of the pilot programs here in New Hampshire back in 1996. The result is that commercial and industrial customers largely contracted with competitive electric suppliers, and residential customers, largely about 90%, remained on default service. It just even though the legislatures thought that in 1996 that within a few years all customers, including residential, would move on to independent power producers. It didn't happen. About 10% migrated, and even that's in flux. A certain number of people come back to the utilities and some people leave the utilities, but it's always been about 90% staying on default service. Default service, you look at your electric bill, it's the power side of the bill, that's the default service. Now some of you here might have actually have gone and done contracts with outside independent power producers. That's okay too, but there's been a very small, probably only 10% have actually done that. Next slide. Utilities, and for Concord, Unitil, we have Unitil, and a small slice of Concord is served by Eversource. But the utilities, by statute, have to go out to the market for 100% of their power needs every 6 months. On a particular day, every 6 months, they go out for power. And if you know anything about markets, that's a terrible way to actually purchase your electric utility power. So it was designed by the legislature. The utilities are doing what's required by the law, but it was never really a good way to get power. And so whenever you go out, whatever's on the market that day, they purchase. And as you saw a year ago, January, you saw the markets were very expensive, so power rates went quite high. So luckily that has changed a lot in the last year. The utilities have purchased power through ISO New England. That's the wholesale market, and also the structure that actually manages the transmission distribution system within New England. And primarily natural gas is the dominant fuel for most of our generation. It's called the marginal fuel price fuel also. That's the price. It's typically the highest cost. That's what sets the cost of electricity within New England. And utilities pass through the fuel costs. They don't make no profit. They're not making any money on that, but they pass through the fuel costs to ratepayers who are subject to natural gas price swings, which we saw a year ago last January. Big price swings went up And I think Unitil probably had the highest utility rates in the state at that point in time. Next slide. What is community power? It means the city, town, or county is assuming the role of the default energy service provider from the utility. The utility will still operate the poles and the wires, the distribution business. They'll still read the meters. They'll still provide the bills, but the power will be actually sourced by the community power. And in this case, we've recommended Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire to do that acquisition process. It's authorized by RSA 53-E, which is the state statute. The key 2019 statutory amendment to the community power law allowed opt-out programs. Prior to 2019, all people who were interested in community had to opt in. And you know, people are just very lethargic. People don't typically opt in. But the new program under 2019, everyone in the community that's on default service are in the program unless they opt out. And anyone who doesn't want to be prepared to do that, you can opt out. So it's up to you and how you want to do that. The opt-out will open the door for adoption of community power. There really were no community power programs prior to this amendment in 2019. And the decision to adopt community power is made by the local community, whether it's here, city council, whether it's town selectmen, select boards, and also counties. Counties are also allowed to do community power. And there it's whatever their managing commission is that makes those decisions. Next slide. You see the word opportunity. I want to stress that word. We're not making any guarantees, but the chances are the way that energy will be sourced under the community power program, it's a lot smarter way of sourcing energy. And we believe that it will always result in a lower cost than what the utilities can offer, because they go out once every 6 months. Under the Community Power Coalition, they're always shopping for the best deals for the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years. And it's a process that's tried and true within the electric utility industry, and it's pretty certain that it'll deliver more affordable electricity to our electricity customers. There's also an opportunity under community power to increase the amount of renewable energy over state law requirements. There's a renewable energy law, and by statute, it tops out at 25.2% of energy supply in 2025 has to be renewable energy under the Renewable Energy Program in New Hampshire. And that's as high as it gets by statute. But I think as Rob was just mentioning, if we hope to meet the goals in Concord of 100% renewable electricity by 2030, we've got to go way beyond that. Okay, so community power gives us the opportunity to try to figure out how to do that. And it's not just a matter of sourcing energy, but it's also introducing the community more what's called demand side management, managing the demand, whether it's energy efficiency or demand management. All those things are tools that we would have at our opportunity to use to try to reduce the demand and increase the amount of renewable energy available to the community. And an important thing also is that there's opportunities on the community power to do innovative energy solutions. So the statute allows us to do that, which is far and beyond what the utilities have been doing for us over the years. And the last important thing is it does not cost the taxpayers any money. The program costs are covered by program rates. So it doesn't cost, the city council will not have to allocate money for this program. It's all based on rates. Okay, next slide, if there's another one. And this is where I'm going to introduce Chuck. Go to it, Chuck.
So Rob earlier referenced Concord's renewable energy goals. Electricity 100% by 2030, heating, cooling, and transportation by 2050. So pretty ambitious goals. And again, the community power program is in the name of trying, or partly at least, in the name of trying to achieve those goals. Next slide. These are the recommendations that our Energy and Environment Advisory Committee voted on at our meeting last month. First question was, should we pursue community power? The answer was yes. should we pursue an opt-out program as opposed to an opt-in program? Because you can do either. We chose opt-out, and we'll explain a little bit in the next slide what opt-out means. Third question was, who should we work with? And we really considered two choices, the coalition or a broker-supplier model through Standard Power. We chose the coalition. Listed there are some of the factors that we thought were most important. We were really impressed by the coalition's governance, just really robust governance that appeared to us to be based on best practices where community programs, power programs exist around the country. Transparency, stability of operations. They have reserves that are, I think, will allow the coalition to remain strong as a community power provider going forward. They've operated really well for the almost year that they've operated so far. Just high level of performance, an opportunity to collaborate with fellow towns through the coalition. That's a big factor for us. An opportunity to innovate. It's not just going to be adding renewable electricity and adding, but trying to find the smartest ways to add it, the most cost-efficient ways to add it, the ways that'll enable, reliability of the grid locally. All of those things. We want kind of a holistic solution that we think we're better able to accomplish through the coalition. And we also prize their advocacy. They are present, trying to advocate for community power in the legislature and before the regulators, and there's a constant need to do that. There are constantly bills being introduced that might threaten community power, either intentionally or unintentionally, or opportunities for community power. So being present, being on top of state policy is a big advantage, we think, for the coalition. The last thing that we decided on or voted on as a recommendation was what to make the default offering for this program. Under the program, there are going to be 4 different rate offerings, but one of them is the default offering for somebody who doesn't choose an option. And there are really 2 possibilities for the default offering. One is RPS level renewable energy. Community power programs, like the utilities, must meet the RPS requirements, so you can't go lower than that. Or you can choose a higher level of renewable energy as the default, and we're recommending 33% as the default. Next slide. How would community power be implemented in Concord? It would be done by a mechanism where we would send out notice letters to residents, and there would be 2 types of notice letters that would go out. One would be to customers that are currently receiving energy service from Unitil or Eversource. And those people would be given the chance to opt out of community power through the notice. If they get the notice, check the right boxes, return the notice, they can opt out if they want. If they don't make an option, they're in the program. People who are currently on competitive electric supply are treated differently under an opt-out model. They're essentially the opt-in selection or exception to opt-out. And the reason is that people who are on competitive electric supply have already made a choice. They've chosen competitive electric supply. And they may be in contracts that may need to continue, and we can't pull them out of those contracts before their contracts expire, certainly not without their consent. So those people are not in the community power program unless they choose to opt in. It may be that under their contract, they can get out of it without a penalty. It's easy to do and they want to do it. The option is there to opt in. Or they can wait till the end of their contract and opt in then. Or they can never opt in, whatever they want to do. So now for the product choices. Basically, we're proposing, again, 33% renewable energy as the default offering, but people can choose within the program as other options to opt down to RPS level renewable energy, opt up to 50% renewable energy or opt up to 100% renewable energy. So this is all about choice for people. People will have the choice to choose any of the 4 offerings in the Community Power Program or remain on utility service or competitive electric supplies. So really more choices for residents than they currently have. Okay, so what will the practical effect be once we launch, if the City Council decides that we should launch? You will still receive 1 electric bill from the utility, and the energy charges from the Community Power Program will be included in that utility bill. In that sense, it's like competitive electric supply today. If somebody's on competitive electric supply, they get 1 bill that includes a power or energy charge from the competitive electric supplier in it. Unitil and Eversource still own the lines and still charge their transmission, distribution, and other costs. Next bullet, we don't expect to launch a program without a price savings at the start. I think Joe pointed out that there's no guarantee over time, although we believe that Community Power will offer lower rates over time. But the rates change every 6 months. There could be a moment when utility rates are lower than the program is able to offer. But the one thing you do control, and we would try to control, is to offer a price savings at the start. So if at the moment we're intending to start, we're not able to offer lower rates under our program, then we would, the idea would be that we would hold back on launch. Another thing to point out, this affects probably a smaller group of people, but it's an important group of people. Some people in our community have their own solar panels on their roofs or whatever and are net metering to the utilities. And the intent of Community Power is to enable those people to also participate in Community Power, but there's been a problem since Community Power programs have launched in terms of exchanging data in the right way that allows those net metering customers to get full credit for their exports to the grid under a Community Power program. The Community Power programs are not receiving all of the information they need to properly credit net metering customers. So that's an ongoing problem that we believe will be solved, but isn't solved yet. So the approach currently is to not move net metering customers over to Community Power because we don't want them to lose credit for their exports to the grid. Okay, Community Power Plan, kind of one step that's necessary before launching a program is to develop a Community Power Plan and to have it approved by first the municipality and also by the Public Utilities Commission. That's required under the statute to get those 2 approvals. The City Council has not yet approved the concepts yet of going forward, so that's a decision that's yet to be made. But to kind of facilitate, the quickest possible launch, if they make that decision, we're working on our Community Power Plan right now. There are drafts of it in the back of the room, and you're free to pick up one of those on the way out if you're interested. But what we still need to do is, first of all, further discuss the plan within our committee. The draft plan that's here has not been approved by our committee even yet. Once our committee approves it, probably after the City Council has decided on the big questions that we've recommended already, we'll send it to the City Council. Hopefully they will approve it, and we will also send it to the PUC for approval. And once you've gotten those 2 approvals, then you've got kind of a pathway to launch from there. But those are steps we still need to take. Oh, and kind of to give you a sense of the status right now, a few months ago there were 30-ish communities that had filed Community Power Plans. There's been a big push in terms of communities filing their plans with the PUC, which is kind of a sign of both lots of communities taking seriously the opportunity to pursue community power. They're making some effort to draft plans to get them in, and I think the communities that have filed their plans, most of them intend to launch this year, maybe even this summer. And I think I will turn it over to you. This is Jennifer Galbraith, another member of our committee.
Hi, good evening. I've been on the committee for quite some time, and I also serve, I work at Department of Environmental Services, Air Resources Division as the Climate Energy Program Manager, just as a complete disclaimer. So as Chuck was mentioning, community power has been growing really fast. In 2023, there were 20 communities served by community power. Some of those are right here around Concord, Canterbury, Dover, Nashua, several communities down in the Peterborough area as well. Some of those went with the coalition and some went with the Standard Power. Then coming in this year, we have about 15 more communities to launch programs in March or so. Both the same kind of setup, either going with the coalition or Standard Power, as you can see. But there's a lot going on around all the communities here in New Hampshire, which is really exciting for the residents of our state. In general, we have like over 120 cities and towns that are going to be served by community power programs possibly. Here in Merrimack County, we recently voted to join the coalition, and obviously, as we just discussed, we're developing a plan. Thanks, Chuck. Great. So here a little bit of the timeline. In October and November, we had these same kind of input sessions, trying to get the information out to the community. Last month, our committee voted on recommending this to the City Council. And here we are today. In March and April, the City Council will be voting on this recommendation to join the coalition. In between that, here and there, our committee members are reaching out to the city councilors and having these discussions and making sure that they understand what is being set forth with them, and having that discussion to make sure they understand what they're going to be voting on. So we're planning a lot of these kind of discussions. There will be notices and public information sessions, as I just mentioned. I believe in the water bill, your water bill, you will be seeing a notification of this coming forward. But we're hoping that this will be launched in the fall, maybe September or October. We're hoping that this is the plan. Yeah, so there's more information on the city website, www.concordnewhampshire.gov sustainability. You can get a lot of the documents that we have set forward.
Hello, my name is Henry Herndon. I am the Director of Member Services with Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. We are a nonprofit in the state that was created by New Hampshire cities, towns, and counties for the specific purpose of operating these programs. A lot of our leadership was involved in the legislative and regulatory processes to create these programs, create the framework for them. And we launched, as you saw some of the other slides, last year, and currently are operating community power in about, as of this March, it'll be about 28 towns, and that's about 120,000 customers in the state. And very proud to be working with these communities and those customers and realizing savings and value and benefits for all of them. So pleased to be here with the committee, and I'm gonna just share a little more about community power and the coalition. So so a lot of this will be just a reiteration of what we've already heard, so I won't repeat too much stuff. I'll try to move through that quickly, but we'll talk about what is community power, we'll talk about your plan and your process, we'll talk about the coalition as a nonprofit power agency, and we'll talk about, and happy to discuss any questions and answers. So we discussed this, but there's sort of three pieces to cities and towns implementing community power, essentially there's a bulk purchase of electricity. You get pooled purchasing power, you have an economy of scale, you can drive down electric rates and have greater choice. Unitil, as the utility, is always going to deliver that power, always going to own the grid and operate the grid, and is not negatively impacted in any way by these programs. They're really a partner in this. And then there's the value for customers with lower rates, the clean energy choices we've talked about, and then potential to maybe develop local sources of power, implement innovative energy efficiency or other clean energy programs. Those are more down the line, but there's good potential there. So it's a voluntary program. The customer always has a choice of who they want to buy their power from, and there's no taxpayer money, as was mentioned. It's self-funded through the customer payment on the electric bill. So we talked about benefits, and so I don't need to necessarily reiterate all of this, but we do have commitments with the communities we work with in the electric aggregation plans that we won't launch service at a higher rate than the utility company, and that's something we take seriously. In terms of the bill for the customer, this is a Unitil bill. It'll look the same. You'll still get a bill from Unitil once the program is up and running. There will be the delivery side on the left, which is the Unitil's charges for its delivery service, its poles and wires. And then on the right side, there's supplier service, and that would change to read Concord Community Power. This is an example where Exeter Community Power, which is one of the programs that's up and running and has been since April. We mentioned many of the key points. But if and when the program launches, the default customers after the notice period would be automatically enrolled if they make no decision. So customers would be automatically switched, and they can choose to, at the website or with an email or by calling a phone number, very easily opt out or choose one of the cleaner energy options. We just a small clarification on a lot of really good information, but there's one mailer that addresses both the customers that are on the Unitil default supply and the customers that are on the third-party supply. It just has a section that makes clear if you already shop with another provider, you're not affected, you don't need to do anything, everything stays the same for you. And I think we've touched on some of these other points. So process, the plan is essentially a document that details everything we're talking about here, and that's what the committee is developing. And this is the same process, but maybe in different words. But the city's formed a committee, they've developed that plan or in process of conducting their research, holding their hearings, and they've made a number of recommendations as described. The next big milestone would be for the city council to take up and consider those recommendations. And if they so chose, to vote to join the Community Power Coalition in New Hampshire as a member, along with 50 other cities and towns that are members of the organization and participate in the governance of the organization. The city would also send the plan to the Public Utility Commission. This has been said, and there's a 60-day review period. And then the final decision would be for the council to adopt that plan is one thing, and then to adopt the agreements and policies to launch. Again, this has been discussed, but the plan also defines goals, objectives, governance. There's certain legal requirements in state law that the plan would comply with. And adoption of the plan by the city council is not a commitment to act, but it is giving themselves the authority to then enter into a service agreement with a provider. In terms of the noticing, I'm sorry, it's not perfectly, is it coming from right here? Maybe I can, there we go. So let's say you go through that checklist that Chuck and I laid out. What would occur would be each customer in town would receive a letter in the mail, welcome to Concord Community Power, with all the details that we've just discussed, and the rates of the program. And the three options, they could go to communitypowernh.gov to opt out or opt in or make whatever choice, and there would be a Concord specific page there. And these, the other details that we've discussed would be explained to the customers in that. Within 15 days of the mailing, the city would hold a public information session that would be noticed in the letter that goes to everybody in town or in the city. and they could attend that one or more public information session to learn more as well. So in terms of the rates, again, this was shared by previous slides, but just to give you some examples. So currently, the committee is recommending this option labeled Granite Plus, 33% Granite Plus, 8.4 cents, that row here. So that added 10% renewable energy is still more affordable than Unitil's current rate, which is 10.7 cents. So Unitil has relatively high rates. 3 out of 4 of the clean energy options are still more affordable than the Unitil rate. So the city could still realize great savings and meet its renewable energy goals with that recommendation that has been made by the committee. These are the current rates. The coalition, as utilities do, rates change on a 6-month cycle with utilities. And the coalition, we have the flexibility to sort of monitor that process. And as utilities adjust their rates, our board of directors, which is folks from city councils and select boards and other community members from around the state, our board sets our rates, and we are able to adjust the rate as the utility rate changes. There's also commercial customer rates. This might look a little busy, but the point here is the utility for certain commercial customers changes the electric rate every month. For some of the larger mid-sized commercial customers, those customers can participate. They have all the same choices, and the Granite Basic and Granite Plus are still savings month over month to those customers. So there's some of the larger, more sophisticated customers have monthly variable rates. They are all accommodated. And I'll just note that in these instances, the Granite Basic is 20% more affordable depending on which customer group you're in, 20 to 25% more affordable. So in terms of the coalition, this is the current membership of the nonprofit, and the communities shown in green. They sort of kicked off the market when they launched in 2023 in the spring, and then shortly thereafter for some. So, Dover, Lebanon, Nashua, Portsmouth, some of the other cities around the state, and then a number of towns really from all around. The communities listed in blue, particularly the top tier of them, their programs they've mailed the letters, they've had their public information sessions, they've done everything but for reach March 1st, which is when the customers will actually be switched. Fun detail, I guess, is the switch happens on the day the utility reads your meter once a month to send you a monthly bill. So whatever day in March, customers in Durham, Hudson, New London, Newmarket, Pembroke, Warner, Webster, et cetera, whatever day in March the utility reads their meter and sends that bill, the next meter cycle, the next billing cycle, they'll be a community power customer. And then some of the community, that was a really good slide on how many towns are doing this. I didn't even know the numbers, so, but they're sort of in the lighter blue and the red at the bottom. They're in sort of a Concord. Concord's in good company, I guess, in these communities that are in the planning phases. This is the board of directors of the organization, so community governance is a really key aspect of what we do. We were created by cities and towns. We are accountable to them. And our leadership, our board is made up of those communities. So senior staff from the city of Dover, or a assistant mayor from the city of Lebanon, or other individuals from the communities make all the governance decisions of the organization. They set our budget, they set our rates, they hire our CEO. And a lot of them have come from the energy sector and have a lot of expertise there. So former state legislators and regulators who understand that side of the industry, former utility executives who are now volunteering on their local committees like you have here, and just a great breadth and depth of experience. In terms of staff, we sort of think of it as community governance plus expert staff and operations are sort of make the whole. So our CEO, Brian Kalman, he was formerly vice president of power supply at another nonprofit utility, New Hampshire Electric Co-op, where he did very well in terms of getting affordable power for folks relative to the other utilities. He's now a CEO, and we have a number of staff, myself and a couple of other staff on the team, as well as some service providers for sort of what's going on behind the scenes. We're purchasing power, we're managing a portfolio of electricity, We have accounting, legal, banking. We have, we're subject to audits and reporting to all the members. And we have customer service. So pick up the phone, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays, and you get somebody on the customer service line to, answer your question or opt you in and out or whatever you like. So there is sort of a service side to the organization. This is just showing rates over time, and I'm sorry it's a little busy. We do have all the utilities here, but the most important lines are the top blue line, which is the Unitil line. As you can see, it was very high back in May, June of last year, came down a bit, came down again. And then the green line, which is the coalition's rates. So you can sort of see over time the coalition adjusts its rates and has always been lower than Unitil and the other utilities. And so that's sort of shown there in green. One thing I want to touch on, and I think this will be of interest to City Council as well, is the community reserve funds. So we're essentially a nonprofit power company. This year we're looking at revenues of $80 to $100 million. The vast majority of that is paying for the cost of electricity to then sell it to residents and businesses. We have a little bit of operating costs. But the net revenue, was sort of what would be the profit margin of a private company. The net revenue is deposited into a reserve account. And this account is a key aspect of what we do. It helps our stability. So we're going to have long-term, high-quality service because we have that cushion and we have good financials. And it's essentially owned by the member communities. So we track that according to what portion of it is associated with each town. And over time, there are opportunities for individual towns to make use of discretionary reserve funds for local projects if they would choose to do that. So we have a couple slides where we'll talk a little more about reporting and see concretely what do those numbers look like. So maybe I'll move ahead. Oh, just a couple points. So one of the reasons community power works relative to what utilities and certain other approaches do is we're actively managing a power portfolio. So utility buys power once, set it, forget it, come back and buy it when the regulators say you can, which is a little different from what competitive suppliers or the coalition do, which is manage a portfolio. So it's sort of like an investment portfolio, but we're monitoring the market, we're buying a portion of it here, there, the other, some short term, some longer term, and by managing that actively, as the market conditions change, that's where we really drive savings for the customers. Again, this is a little busy, but transparency and accountability are a big part of what the coalition does. This is a draft report on revenue, cost, and benefit, and it's broken down by town. I'd sort of direct you over to these columns that have customer savings and community benefit. So customer savings, this is just our record of how many dollars have been saved in each community since we launched. So it's about $8 million as of this past November, actually. The reporting lags a little bit for the collective communities. But we really look at value as how much money are we saving the customer, but also how much money is accruing in a community reserve fund, which purposes for future benefit for the communities. So that's, again, we talked a little bit about net revenue, but if you add that up, there's about $13 million in value thus far since the market launched. I'll also just note Exeter. Exeter is a good example because they're a Unitil community. Exeter has about $1.2 million in customer savings just since last April. So there's been a real advantage to the folks of Exeter for participating. And more reporting, this is just number of customers per town. Again, Exeter is a good example in white there. About 7,500 accounts. Concord with 40,000 people might be, I don't know, maybe it's 20,000 accounts, I'm not sure. 18,000 accounts, excellent. So a little more than double of Exeter. And this just shows, Exeter has different customers have chose to opt up and down. The majority of customers, 97%, are in the lowest cost product, Granite Basic, and then a small number have opted up. So this is the kind of thing. You can see also there's, in this column here, there's the 3 green boxes. Those are the 3 towns like Concord, which are recommending more renewable energy for folks. So Hanover being a good example where 90% of those customers are actually buying cleaner power. So that's a little busy, but I think useful for transparency purposes. And happy to turn it back over to the committee or answer any questions. I think I see one back there.
Happy to take questions, comments. Yes, how are you?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Warner. I guess my question is about Concord's goals towards using more renewables as a city, and specifically for residential customers. You mentioned that there was a pot of money that would be set aside for the city to spend on potentially renewable projects or energy-related things. And I know that Concord is recommending that people buy into a slightly higher tier than the basic level in order to get some renewables. Would it be possible to pair the two so that people could get a discount and still get renewables, but not have to pay out of pocket to do that?
So possibly, and it would depend on the specifics. So there are lots of discussions with the members. Nashville comes to mind where they're interested in, how can we use our reserve fund? So first off, if for Concord to have a reserve fund, the city of Concord would have to decide to do that. Say, add 1/10 cent a kilowatt hour to the electric rate to have the Concord Reserve Fund. So that could be an option. And then these are sort of going to be applied for the first time this August, which a lot of communities are excited about. And I think there's innovation happening there. So I think we could get specific with Concord about exactly how you could use the reserve fund. I don't know if I'm answering you exactly, but
It's possible.
okay, yeah, it is possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility where you could have significant solar array in the city that we could, pending some legislative changes.
Or not, but
Or
yeah.
not, we'll see. That it's possible that they could be, essentially, community power could be off-taker of that. The community power program could off-take that to help meet our goals and to keep rates stable. I think the other aspect about the reserve is that it will provide an opportunity to smooth spikes out over time, correct?
That's right.
So it gives more flexibility in that way as well, to have that reserve and have that capacity system-wide, coalition-wide, correct?
It is. Yeah. And just one more point here. So you could accrue monies to invest in energy projects. Alternatively, and perhaps more likely early on, you wouldn't need to spend money up front on, say, buying power from a solar array. A private developer could build that array, spend their money on it, and you could enter into a long-term power purchase agreement where you agree to buy the output for a 10-year period, so there's no upfront cost. So that's one option for developing projects as well.
One point, first, I'll go back to her question is, that would be after they get the data system figured out on the solar, before they can do that according to what you said at the beginning. They can't do that right now. And the other point would be, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I don't quite understand what's in it for Unitil if they're still doing everything.
Yeah, so two good points. So on the data sharing for solar net metered customers, that's primarily for individual customer with like a solar array on their roof or in a field at their house or business. So you're right there. That has to be resolved. And then there's maybe a second category, which is developing a community solar array to sell power into the broader program. So both will take some time to work out, but they are very much in the works.
Okay.
And your second point, why would Unitil do this? So they're doing everything in terms of making sure the poles and wires stay up and running, but they are not actually shopping for your electricity. So you now have sort of another agent that is responsible for shopping for power and buying it from the sources you choose and helping you develop your energy projects and programs.
You said they're still sending out the bills and everything, so it's like they're still doing everything except getting paid.
No. So, yeah, that's a good point. So they are getting paid for everything that they do because everything they get paid for is on this delivery side of the bill. Okay. They don't make any money on the supply side. That's a pass-through charge. And whether it's the old way or whether somebody goes to shop for another customer with another provider or whether it's community power, they don't lose any revenue on that.
Right, they're not in the business of making profit on the energy that they supply. It hasn't been that way for some time. But they own the poles and wires, the transmission. So you'll see on your electric bill, actually, the transmission portion cost is among the highest parts of your bill, because obviously it takes resources to distribute energy. So in that way, as Joe had said at the beginning, utility goes out and it is what it is in terms of what is available in the market. Community power is superior, we believe, because it provides more flexibility. It's more nimble. It has the customer more at the center of what are we trying to do? What value are we trying to produce for our member communities and the customers within our communities? And I think that's where the added value, particularly of community power, comes in from in that part of the equation. So. Yeah.
How often can someone opt in or opt out? Monthly or once a year?
Monthly, whenever your next billing cycle is, it would be effective. So on a monthly basis,
Yeah.
in or out,
Or up or down.
or up or
Or up or
down.
down, depending on what option you want to change.
And then that Monday, March 11th meeting, what are the chances that our city will actually vote on it, or will they just table it, study for a few more months?
Well, that certainly is up to the 15 members of the city council, some that are here, the mayor is here, thank you, Mayor. There will be a public hearing on March 11th, which will afford anybody from the community to come and provide their perspective. And then it is up to the city council to take the next action. Oftentimes, at city council meetings, there's two phases how that works. There's the public hearing, and you go through all the public hearings, and then you go to the action phase, and you start again where at the first, what was the first public hearing that you had, and then you make decisions as you go down the line. Are we going to approve, in this case, after the public hearing, would the city council accept and approve the recommendation that our energy committee has made, which is to join the coalition? So that's all up to the council at that point. And oftentimes, having served on the council, oftentimes a public hearing is convened in the evening, in that same night, and the action phase either approves or does not during that phase. But oftentimes things happen that evening. So, certainly possible. We hope it is, actually. So.
On the cycle of purchasing power, which you mentioned is on a 6-month cycle, I know there's been a fair amount of attention paid to this more recently, criticism of it as well. I believe so. A multi-phase question. One, isn't there some legislation pending in the legislature to change that to 6 and/or the option of a longer duration time period? 1. 2, presently, if it stays as it is, February 1 to July 31, which is the current, which you quoted, will the coalition, Concord City Power Coalition, will they be subject to the same fixed 6-month duration?
So this is a really good question, and I'd like to maybe clarify on what I said previously. So while our board does adjust the rate charged to customers on a 6-month basis, that does not mean we buy power every 6 months. We have a risk management committee. Every month they meet, we're looking at the market, and every month we could be buying a block of wholesale power or a portion of the portfolio out a certain amount of time. So it's an active buying process on an ongoing basis. And then when the utilities change their rates, we can adjust our rates as well. But we're not just buying power once every 6 months. We're essentially in the market all the time. So that, I hope that answers.
Okay, yeah. And the legislature,
But the first question, yes, I understand there was perhaps some legislation that was at least to investigate that option. One of you maybe know more about this, but in terms of
legislature in the audience.
sure.
I'm happy to respond to it. question. Rebecca McWilliams, State Representative for South Concord, 5678 are the wards that I cover, and I serve on the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. We did have a bill pending, and I think it will still be moving to the House floor. It came out of committee with a negative recommendation. Really what the crux of the issue is actually Eversource, not Unitil. So Eversource has a Public Utilities Commission notice of decision that they have to go out to bid every 6 months. And so the legislation was to override that decision and say, no, Eversource, if you want to go in shorter durations or longer durations, you can. We want to override that. It's about a 10-year-old decision. And so unfortunately, there were a lot of nuances in the bill that didn't work out in committee. And so I think it's going to go back to square one in September to file a cleaner bill. But it still needs to go to the House floor. There may be a floor amendment to it. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but it got a negative recommendation out of committee, and it will be voted on in the next 3 weeks. So that's the status on legislation. I had a question on default service. I know you showed a beautiful graph that showed how default service was really high up there, and everybody in New Hampshire who's not energy savvy is basically locked into default service with their utility provider, right? Yeah, that one right there. So they don't know any better, so they don't go to a third party, they don't shop, they don't look for something cheaper, they just get stuck with that default service. And it's high, and it's been high, and it's been the subject of a lot of concern from our residents because they can't budget for it, right? When the winter heating bills happen and you're just spending all this money on heating your house, it's kind of crazy. So I know you showed that beautiful red line that is where the Community Power Coalition is.
So just to clarify, so that is actually not, the red line is it's a broker model of community power, and
It's
you
a
can.
green line?
The green line is community power
Okay.
or coalition. The red line is some examples of those other providers that were mentioned, and they sort of lock in a long term. And as you can see, they're actually at a higher price than all of the utilities and the coalition presently.
Yeah, so they lock you in and then you kind of get stuck. So my question is, in terms of negotiating this contract between Concord and the Community Power Coalition, do we have some assurances that moving forward, based on past performance, there's a way to lock it in below the default service rate, some kind of a guarantee or warranty for a certain lower than level, so that for these non-savvy electric consumers who would just stick with Community Power Coalition because they've stuck with the default service rate thus far, is there some guarantee that we can get some protection for those folks that they're going to be under default service?
So there is not a guarantee that 100% of the time Community Power will always be more affordable than the utility company. So far, for 3 consecutive rate periods, every single one of those we have been. And we think we have this advantage because we manage the portfolio for why we can continue to do that. But it is not a 100% guarantee for all of time. It will always be lower.
Consider also it's a nonprofit, so there's not a profit margin that goes to a shareholder. So that helps the formula also. If I could,
Nick, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you.
if I can also add, we talked about reserves. Those reserves can be used to make sure the rates are kept within certain bounds, so they're not as noisy as we've seen in the last couple of years. But those reserves can also be used at the discretion of the municipality to do other things, such as energy efficiency. Right now, the energy efficiency program in New Hampshire is stuck at funding 2020 level funding. And that's where it's stuck at, with a cost of living allowance in there, which is quite small. And it doesn't meet the needs of the state of New Hampshire. So those reserves, if the municipalities, Concord, decides they want to do more energy efficiency, those reserves can be used for that also. And remember, it's not just the power we buy and the price of that power, but it's also making sure that we use as little as power as possible or in the best fashion possible. And as with more electric vehicles come out, it's going to be a real challenge to try to reduce our electric use. At the same time, we're using it for transportation.
That segue with the electric vehicles actually, comes to a broader question, regarding the goals. I think it was one of you who said that goals are ambitious, or that was probably a very large understatement as far as the ability for us to be able to provide electricity. Now, we're in a situation now where a lot of places across the country, if it gets too hot during the day, there's a risk of brownouts because people are putting on their air conditioners. And we are in the spot now where we're talking about sourcing renewable energy when we aren't in a spot where we can keep up with the load on the grid, right? So I'm in a situation where, you know, I live up in the northeast part of Concord. I'm one of those few Eversource folks. Now, we're heating the house with propane, right? Because we don't even have the natural gas piped up, right? So is that the 2030 goal to get it so what we're transmitting across the grid is all coming from renewable energy? Or is that to include our heating our homes?
The goal is separated into two sort of phases. There's an electricity generation goal by 2030. There's the thermal and transportation goal that is further out, 2050.
Okay, because during the presentation, I didn't pick up that thermal was part of 2050.
It is, and you should have clarified that. I would say that the electricity goal is it's all very ambitious, but I would say the electricity goal is a bit easier to reach than the transportation and thermal goal. But that's in part why we put that, and many communities have put that out a little further in terms of trying to get on that road over time to that goal. That's how that's how that would work.
If the home heating is put in the more distant bucket, it does make it a little potentially more achievable. So I guess the second question that would come along with that is, how are we defining renewable for the energy? And I will preface it with this. The sun is going to come on every day, but there's times where the clouds are blocking it. But more importantly, while the sun is going to be constantly generating some level of power that we can use, the solar panels that we use aren't renewable and they're not recyclable. They're just hazmat, right? So if we're saying that we're going to take care of our environment by putting up a solar farm and knocking down an acre worth of trees to do it, and then after a 7-year lifespan, we need to take all those solar panels, bury them somewhere, and do it again, I'm not so sure that we're actually in a spot where we're using anything renewable.
Well, to that point, the average lifespan of a solar panel is close to 30 years, not 7. You're not going to be switching them out every 7 years.
Even at 30, the same.
Which is significantly
Yeah.
further. But I would also say that and this is happening now and will be rapidly increasing. As an entire region, remember, we're all one grid in 6 New England states managed by ISO New England. The Vineyard Wind Project, 15 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, is already generating power. That one project, when completed this summer, will provide enough electricity for 400,000 homes. And that's one offshore wind project. I believe that offshore wind is going to be a very significant player in terms of providing that extra load, that extra base load power to our grid over the long term. It has tremendous potential, and as I said, it's already generating power into the grid right now with the first utility scale project off of Martha's Vineyard, 15 miles off the island. So I expect that's going to be a significant player. Solar certainly will be. Battery storage is essential and important in terms of this, but these technologies are also coming along. So I think that over the long term, you're right in terms of the recognition that in order to create a true clean energy economy and to decarbonize, we need to electrify everything. But that requires more. But I think that we are on the road to figuring that out. What is that more? So.
That's fair, but I guess I would also just point out that those turbines eventually wear out and they're not recyclable, so they get
Well, that's true.
piled up or buried
The
somewhere.
coal-fired power plant also eventually has the end of its life, as a nuclear power plant does as well.
Yes, but no one's calling, the coal-fired power plant renewable, right?
I'll just note that I know a lot of solar firms do recycle their panels. It's pretty readily available.
Yes, but there are, metals and whatnot in them. Not everything in those panels is reusable. I mean, we all know they're not 100% reusable. Yes, but there's.
Are there
no
any
one
other
who's expecting
questions
that
or
they would be.
comments?
I appreciate those points that you brought up.
So just one thing we're also looking at is energy efficiency. So trying to reduce the amount of energy that people are relying on using. So we will be launching programs, weatherized programs, to try for energy conservation. So yeah, there'll be a greater demand for electricity, but also trying to get people to rely more or less on electricity at the same time, so we don't have to have as many solar farms.
Well, that's true, because don't forget, I mean, it's not the most flashy thing, but the cheapest unit of energy is the one that's not used.
Oh, correct, the savings is.
So the energy efficiency is really important.
Any investment that we put in
Right.
helping people be able to.
On the
use
demand
solar is
side.
Great.
Right.
No, it's just we have to have an understanding that, we have a lot of folks in this community that are basically rural, even though Concord, the suburb.
Right.
Now, you get out on the west side, the northeast corner where I am, now, we don't even have water and sewer, right? So, this is like taking someone who's driving a, 79 Pinto and telling them the next thing's a Lamborghini. We need a path between.
Excuse me. I hope council supports this concept and approves it. I think it's great. A lot of built-in flexibility. I'm on an alternate supplier right now. To me, it's a piece of cake. I hope they support it, one. Two is, this was a good presentation basically for residential usage, but the city. So city buildings in city electric utility services, which we all pay for here, can the city opt in similarly to residential customers, one, and two, because the city has entered into an agreement with a hydropower facility in Pennacook. So how does that work out? Go ahead.
I was just going to note, so the city accounts in their buildings are like any other customer. They can, if they're on the default utility, they would be automatically enrolled. I think they're probably shopping with another provider, so they could choose to opt in. So it's pure choice.
Right now, you're paying 6 cents.
Right, because we have.
So the city's paying a lot less than what we could get through the coalition.
Right.
Mainly
That's one
because
thing that's good for our tax.
of renewable.
Right.
Not many, but that's one.
Right.
Is that right?
I heard you well.
Exactly. Mainly because of the renewable energy credits that we purchase right now. in terms
So
of-
how about how it interrelates with the hydro agreement?
Well, that is a city, well, that's another matter, actually. So we are pursuing other renewable energy projects, solar, significant solar,
Yeah.
where that arrangement may be adjusted to accommodate larger solar projects, but that's really a separate initiative. The community power initiative is really geared towards the residential customer because, and in part of our goals, the only way, frankly, that we could get on the path to our community as a whole being renewable energy to a high percentage is to adopt this kind of approach. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do this. We wouldn't be able to do that. So, but go ahead.
Full disclosure, I'm on the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee, but I would say part and parcel with that, and for me, more than any particular rate, the transparency and the local control that residents have over all of the decisions related to their power was one of the most compelling things for me in looking at this. And to some of the earlier points made, if the community doesn't ultimately decides that pursuing what I think is really important, pursuing renewable power on an aggressive timescale, if ultimately the community decides that isn't the direction we want to go, this is a way where we maintain control over that decision as a community. And my voice, it's not just my voice, it's the community as a whole's voice as well. So there's a rate piece of this, and there's a renewal piece of this, there's a local control piece of this, and I think those are some of the most exciting things for me as someone who went through this process with the committee.
Thank you. I did want to add one aspect of transparency to the understanding of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. All of their meetings are open to the public. Online, you can go, you can actually see what's going on, how decisions are made, what the discussion is, what the various decision points are to get to their particular rates at any given time. And I think that's a tremendous advantage of just Sunlight, of how is it that we are participating if the city council follows through as we hope they do in terms of joining the coalition, how is it that we're participating? And any of our residents, that would be available to them to understand how that was all operating. I think that's a tremendous benefit. So.
If I can also offer, the thing about the city of Concord, they have what's called market power. All the municipal demand is a significant load, so they're able to negotiate better contracts. And community power allows, I'll call the ignored section of our electric customers, basically residential and small commercial industrial. They've been left out of the whole process for 20 to 28 years. So this is the opportunity for them to get their market power through the aggregation that's occurring through the coalition. So that's why they can do better rates, because they've got the market power of all those aggregated customers.
I get that concept, but gross numbers.
It counts.
The city has to use 1 million kilowatts of power. We already have an agreement in place, a contract with the hydro facility in Pinnacle. I don't know the amount. Say it's 250,000 kilowatts. So can we go out and purchase, the city go out and purchase through the coalition, the remaining 750,000? Are we bound by the 250,000 first in Pinnacle? And then the residual can be through the coalition?
Do you have an answer?
No,
Because I do if you don't.
Oh, no, it's a different, we're part of a group net metering plan, so they sort of rely on us and we get money from the hydropower. So it's not necessarily that our energy is coming from them,
Right.
it's we get money, we get a check.
Your
that
your
goes
load
against the
yeah.
energy load.
Sorry. Your load is associated with this hydro dam so they can participate in a net metering program. You're not actually buying any kilowatt hours or energy from them.
No, we just get a check
Okay.
for nothing.
But what's important about the
Right.
relationship is the mix of renewable energy for the entire grid.
No, I agree.
So, because obviously an entity has to have customers in order to remain in business. And to the extent that that is a renewable energy resource, it's helping green the grid in New England, which is something that we care about as well. So.
There's one more point, which is that as a group net metering member, you can participate in community power. So the host meter can't, but members can, so they can participate. So
But we think our current contract is better than what we get from the city by joining the coalition at this point in time.
How are nonprofits and private businesses affected? Can they participate along as well as residents?
They can, and really the determining factor is that nonprofit or that business on Unitil's default supply. If they are, they'd be automatically switched over. If that nonprofit or business is already shopping with a different provider, they would remain with that provider.
But they could opt in if they want.
And they could opt in. They always have the choice to join. And some of those customers qualify. They're in a special group or a mid-sized commercial group where their rate changes every month from Unitil, just because the prices change more frequently. And the same type of rate with a monthly change would be available through Community Power at a discount to Unitil under the current rates.
I have a question. So Merrimack County is pursuing community power.
Yes.
How does the county doing that impact communities within the county being part of the coalition? How does that equation work?
So I think that the short answer is the sort of maximum flexibility. So the county is never going to impose a program on any town or city in the county, but now a town or city in the county could choose instead of doing this very rigorous and thorough process that the city of Concord has gone through, that many towns have gone through, the county's doing that. So that town select board in a small town, like Northfield, for example, could choose to, by select board vote, just participate with the county's program. So there's some streamlining for some of the smaller towns that have less resources or volunteer capacity. So it's available to, on a town-by-town basis, to choose to join. The other key point is any customer in the entire county, once Merrimack County Community Power is up and running, can opt in. So it's now an opt-in option for everybody, and if the town wants to participate, they can participate in a streamlined way.
Thank
All right.
Is there a timeline for solving the net metering technological problem?
There's not.
Do you want to, we sort of talked about something yesterday where they'll go through and try to identify all the customers. I'll be able to go through city records to see who has permits, and we'll kind of go back and forth. And then if it's determined that we missed somebody, the coalition actually will figure out how much money they missed out on, and they'll get credited.
Right.
So it's not like you're losing money.
Right.
If that buffer time of figuring it out,
Right.
they did not get their net metering credits, so that people don't lose out on that.
So just to build on that a little bit, that's all totally accurate. And the utility flags customers that are net metering to us, so we know which ones not to enroll. They've missed one or two in the past. We notice them a month or two later, and maybe they lost some net metering credit. And we said, okay, we're going to put you back with the utility, and then we're going to pay you, we're going to reimburse you for whatever that was.
And just to clarify, Henry, the issue is with the utilities and their data system, the
Yes.
ability to deliver that to you.
Yes.
It's not a coalition
Yes, thank you.
limitation, it's a utility limitation.
Right now, the utility companies have not figured out how to comply with state law to share the necessary data so we can accurately include. Basically, the net metered customers are all mini power plants. They're supplying power to Concord Community Power. We'd like to credit them for that. We'd like to get some of our power from them. We need data and cooperation from the utilities, which we're working on through the regulatory process to solve that.
What's the oversight mechanism for salaries and expenses for the coalition? I personally don't know what a CEO for something like this should make.
Yeah, so it's the budget is adopted by our board. Our board includes folks from all of our member towns who are elected by the membership. So oversight is sort of the communities participate in adopting the budget and in making some of those decisions. Salary for senior staff is competitive with other sort of public power utilities or power suppliers at this level. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. But
I mean, it sounds like as long as the cities and towns have qualified people participating, you know, like I've been in the business for 30 years, you know, then we at least have the oversight.
Right.
That, you know, Joe Meany wouldn't know. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true that the folks that are coming forward representing the communities are ones that have experience in this area and have experience in municipal operations and so forth. So I think there's a lot of institutional talent and memory there on the board.
Understanding how
Yeah.
the process goes on the side.
Yeah.
Because a lot of nonprofits just get people who are well-meaning and want to help, but can't add. So.
One of the people on our hiring committee on the board was a former executive at Eversource, statewide or across the tri-state area. But yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, one of the attractions, I think, to the coalition is the quality of people that are involved in it. I mean, it's really some of the thought leaders in the state on energy who are involved in the coalition who really know the business, and long may that continue. But the people who are overseeing these things really do know what they're doing.
Any other questions? Well, that being the case, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. And we'll be hearing more. Those of you who are on city services will be receiving information on community power, and we'll have additional sessions going forward.